Welcome to the ValuClarity podcast, where we talk about customer perceived value, customer perceived outcomes, and everything it takes all around your company to deliver superior customer outcomes. Today, I am thrilled to have a really special guest, Greg Johnson. Greg is the CEO of Webcheck Security, a company that works nationwide doing cybersecurity in a lot of different forms. Greg, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Mark. I do feel special being here today. So thank you for that introduction.
I'm thrilled to have you. Really thrilled to have you. You know, we'd met a month or so ago when you were down being a speaker, and I said, I got to have this guy on my podcast.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit more about Webcheck Security. You can do it more justice than I can if I...
Okay, thank you. Well, true to your book and your thesis and the training that you deliver, Mark, we deliver business enablement, right? Okay, so what does that really mean? Well, we're a cybersecurity company. We're a world-class penetration testing and cyber risk mitigation company. And as we discussed offline, Mark, that really enables companies to continue to do business or to acquire new customers. One way to kind of condense what we do for the layman, because a lot of people don't understand that concept of penetration testing. We break into your bank applications, to electric grids, to firewalls and networks and infrastructure, by permission, of course, with white hat guys who are good guys. They're actually engineers, and they document everything they can find so that at the end of the day, they make our clients better. So that's what we do, number one. And then number two, we help those clients mitigate their risk by actually managing their cybersecurity programs, incident response policies, all kinds of cyber policies to help them be successful in business and not have or be at lower risk of having a cyber breach. And if they do have a breach, what do they do about it? That's essentially our world, Mark, and what we do.
Yeah, and sad for everybody, good for you. Business is good.
Yeah, it is. We met at a webinar, as you know, not long ago, and at that time, the big thing was the Colonial Pipeline and the meat supply chain hack. And since that time, there have been a dozen others. Unfortunately, it's nonstop, and so fortunately for us, we get to help our clients to be better, to enable them to continue to do business, or to recover if they have been breached and they just need help and a good cyber QB to throw the football.
So you say business enablement. Sometimes that's business survival. A lot of companies fail when they get penetrated the wrong way.
Yeah. It's true. I'll never forget, when I first got into the cyber market, it was through what you call the PCI world, and that's the payment card industry, right? Back in the early days of the PCI data security standard, I'll never forget this. I was actually selling forensics for a reputable cybersecurity firm that specialized in the payment card industry, and a small Mexican restaurant got hacked. We did a forensic. This was down in, I think it was New Mexico, somewhere in the Southwest. And MasterCard fined that little restaurant $85,000. That was just MasterCard. And I remember they went out of business, and it impacted me. That was a sad story. But obviously, with larger businesses, it can be on a much more grandiose scale, unfortunately. So we're helping businesses, yes, to recover and hopefully to avoid that whole mess in the first place.
And so, I harp on people not to talk about what you sell, but talk about what your customers buy. And you said it really well: business enablement, business existence, business survival. And so you've got white hat folks trying to keep ahead of, or at least keep pace with, the black hat folks. What does that threat environment look like? Who are the bad guys nowadays?
Well, gosh, what's interesting about that, and what a lot of people don't realize, is that some of our sometimes allies, but often not, Russia and others, China and North Korea, there is a such thing as nation state hacks. These groups have become very organized. There's also organized crime has gotten into the picture. So there's this whole thing called the dark web. If you think of an iceberg, you only see the top of it. That's the internet. But then down underneath the water, there's this dark web that you use a Tor onion browser to get into, and other things that can kind of obfuscate your IP address, and you can sneak around. But there's whole toolkits of malware and ransomware that you can buy, that organized crime and other bad actors can purchase to go out and start hacking. But yeah, I just want to say that we got to be wary. Our corporations are under attack. China wants to become the dominant factor in commerce in almost every vertical, and so they steal IP. And when I say they, I don't mean the good people of China in general. I mean the government. And then Russia's doing similar things. This is not a right-wing conspiracist theory thing either. It's I've been to FBI briefings, and I read the articles. A lot of these groups are like Revel and Sandworm and others. They're known by different names, but a lot of them are backed by ultimately the Russian government or Chinese government. So that's just a brief landscape of who they are and what's happening.
So they're pretty good at what they do. They have access to world-class tools. They share world-class tools with each other. So it's kind of crazy that you need a lot of companies need to mitigate those risks.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, some of those world-class tools were developed by our own NSA, and they leaked and they got out. And so now variations and tweaks of those are hacking our own citizens. But right, Mark. So when I say that we provide business enablement and the ability for clients to acquire customers, that's really what it's all about. We help to identify what those risks are. We can, for example, Mark, you and your listeners, think about, every week you go in to your banking app, right? And you make transfers, you make sure you see what your balance is. Well, you don't want bad actors getting in that. And banks have taken great leaps to, with multi-factor authentication and those kinds of things. But apps are basically composed of ones and zeros, right? Somebody's programmed them and they can be deconstructed. So what we do in this whole business enablement cyber process is we help with these engineers to go in and identify what I would call the low-hanging fruit, those peaches of vulnerability that if the hackers and their tool sets, run scans and they find out, that's a problem. Let's start exploiting this application, that they'll do so, right? So we help identify that, write the reports. These are handwritten, I mean, on a word, but they're handwritten reports. They're not just running scanning technology and spitting out a report. These are all customized engagements with these white hat engineers, and they help at the end of the day to make these companies better and help them to fix their problems. Can I give you an example, Mark, of how
yes, please. Yeah.
How this kind of translates into business enablement? We had a customer that was a mortgage company, and this is one of many really cool stories. But they went out and landed a deal with Costco, right? We all love Costco. Costco offers cool products, but they also offer travel and mortgages and water heaters. And so if you're one of these companies doing business with Costco, you're connecting to their network and their systems or their, acceptance or their EDI. And so you've got to prove that you're secure. That's part of the diligence that the Costco onboarding team has with you as their client. And so this client came to us and said, look, we have to be in alignment with the New York State financial cyber regs, which are pretty steep. Otherwise, Costco won't do business with us because they do business in New York, right? So we sent in what we call a FISO, a fractional information security officer. Most companies don't have them. Even about 38% of the Fortune 500 don't have them, right? It's crazy. So we sent in a very experienced guy to help write their response policies and just demonstrate that they had a cyber plan and put that plan into motion. That company was delighted because we helped them to acquire that Costco business. And so that's an example of how that translates, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, because we've been talking about how to keep yourself from dying, how to keep from losing. And that story tells you that this is about acquiring a new customer, getting a new customer relationship, because some customers insist on this level of competence. And as you said, a lot of companies don't have that level of competence to begin with.
Yeah. And they may have competent, great IT people, but IT does not equal cybersecurity. And here's why. IT is more operational du jour, right? Whereas cybersecurity is a different layer, different training, different experiences. There's got to be somebody that understands how to talk to management, not just about technology, but, in the Mark, Boundy way about business enablement. They have to be able to talk the business model and help the C-suite understand and the board to understand what cybersecurity is, that it's not just about putting in a technology and being safe. It's not an IT problem either. Everybody has to buy into it, right?
Yeah. You're taking me back to when I was a product manager at one of the big telecom gear companies, Lucent at the time. Yeah. And I was product manager for this product. And all the carriers were saying that your product has got to be secure. And so we had this one guy who was the security guru, and I couldn't tell you what HMAC SHA-1 is, but I sure could tell you when we said it, that made a lot of people feel a lot better at the customer.
Yeah.
So you help deliver this business continuity, and you have this fractional information security officer. That's a great jumping off point for one of my hot buttons, one of my harangues, if you will, with my clients, is that everybody at your company should be well aware that you don't sell security, you sell business continuity. And this is the customer outcome. And so you've got some people who are some pretty sophisticated engineers who get down pretty far into the weeds. What do you do as the company leader to make sure that those people are able to operate effectively down in the weeds, but also really understand the business problems, the customer business problems they're solving?
Well, that's a great question, Mark. I can tell you that after this podcast, I'm going to do a lot better job of it than I currently am. But when we onboard, when we hire somebody, we have always had this mantra that we hire them with, and that is that we're not just doing business with B2B, with companies. We're serving them, right? To me, it's a mantra I grew up with, that when you are in the service of your fellow man, you're only in the service of your God. So it's kind of a deep intrinsic value that I have. And so there's a couple of things, Mark. First of all, a pen tester is a highly technical problem solver, right? They love technology. And when you think about that kind of stereotypical world, you think of a guy in a hoodie eating a burrito at 3 a.m. on his keyboard, maybe playing some games. And well, some of them are like that. And they're these highly technical guys, and they live in this different world. But I make them get on a Zoom call and see if they'll, like Mr. Miyagi says, "Lukai, always lukai," right? And if they're conversational. And then the second thing is that once we determine that they're going to fit our culture, do they have an attitude of service? Are they willing to go the extra mile and make sure that at the end of the day, the client is better in their cybersecurity posture? And that's kind of how we try to emphasize that these are not just businesses we're dealing with, they're people, and let's serve them.
I think that's great. I work with that, making sure that everybody is connected to a customer outcome. I also work with making sure that your people your salespeople, your customer interface people aren't just talking about pen testing. They're talking about how that turns into a business outcome. And what all those policies are, what for the mortgage company that was trying to get on with Costco, what their executives knew what that meant, but at the working level, making sure that those people realize what they're doing and why they're going through this process.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes with the people who liaise the most with the client, and that is our practitioners, these engineers or these highly skilled former or current CISOs that we lease out, right, to our clients. We tell them that the business objective here is that this client here, I'll give you another example. This particular client has a 7-figure contract on the line with a number of healthcare institutions. So your job, practitioner, is to help assess that system, articulate the risk, but also help them to land that contract by articulating the roadmap and that their cyber program is sound, right? Now, it may not be sound, but he helps them to get there. So understanding that objective for the client, that it's not just about, oh, ho hum, I have to go do an assessment and write a report. No, I have to help this client land and retain this 7-figure healthcare contract. That's how we approach that.
And when you do it that way, do you think that helps you with your price negotiations?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the client realizes that, they're not going to be dickering around so much on price because they realize that there's a huge value. There's a reason they've come to us, right?
Yeah. When I was young, the salespeople who would go through that conversation saying, this is what it means. This is the 7-figure contract that we're trying to help you land and save. I thought that was the aggressive salespeople, and that was just their style. And you should try to succeed without doing that yourself if you weren't comfortable. But turns out that is what made those high performers, is that you talked about the business outcome, and you kept on talking about the business outcome and asking about business outcome questions until the answers come back in dollars.
Yep. He who understands his client and their business wins the day. Right?
Yeah, I say that. I also say you can't know thy customer's business until you know business. And so I work with a lot of sellers about basic business acumen. Just understanding what business is like and what it's like to run a business and what your customers are going through and what their world probably looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I would have taken that more to heart when I was a young, 20-something representative or regional manager for WordPerfect Corporation. A lot of times in the day, it was what I call show up and throw up, give a cool demo of a cool technology, and people just kind of bought it because they saw the value. But as I grew in that role and in other roles and with other companies and eventually moved to executive teams, I realized that some of the most important questions was help me understand your business model. Having done some research and saying, it's really cool what you guys do, but help me understand a little bit more how you're doing it and what's the impact of this problem you have and what is the problem, and really trying to uncover what they need. And then Mark, if I can share one really cool nugget, is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I have this executive coach because I'm like I'm like a bike tire. It won't spin forever. Somebody needs to keep spinning it. And so I recognize the value of having somebody that just coaches me all the time. And one of the things he said to me is, when you're communicating with your customers, you might want to ask the simple question, so what's a win for you in regards to this engagement? What really are you guys wanting to see? Boy, that's been a fun question. What's your win, right? And boy, I don't lose those proposals very often. That's kind of the golden question right there, is what's the win for you here?
That's a great question. And let me give you a little cherry on top of that.
Sounds good.
You can't ask them this question in front of others, but you can ask when they answer you, what's the win? You can ask them the follow-up question, what does that mean for you personally in your role as, and then give their title.
Oh, I love it.
Because that can mean a promotion. That can mean stock options. That can mean I get to go home earlier. That means I can retire sooner. What does that mean for you personally in your role as blank? Because that adds a third dimension to that wonderful two-dimensional picture that you get when you ask what their win is.
Very good. I like it.
Because everybody's going to buy off of the personal stuff. What comes out of their mouth when they're in front of the group is that business win. But the reason they decide to say something rather than silently sit in the corner is because of that personal win.
Right.
And also, when you ask both of those questions, what is your win? You're actually asking the customer to connect your solution to their win. When they answer both of those questions, they're actually writing a movie and performing a movie and starring in that movie of that outcome happening by answering that question, because you're asking them to envision a world in which they've gotten those things. And so that causes the connection between your product and their outcome to link.
Yeah, that's an interesting insight. I'll never forget, Mark. When I was a younger guy, we're talking 1990 here, and I'd landed a regional manager position with WordPerfect Corporation. I was in training with this wonderful fellow named Brent Doan. I think Brent, maybe he'll listen to this, but he was in Arizona at one point in time, and maybe he's still there. I don't know what he's doing. I haven't looked him up for many years, but he trained all of the incoming groups of these regional managers. And I'll never forget one of the concepts. He said, people buy on emotion and they justify it with logic. I found that to be so true. Even the most logical guy or gal will have certain reasons why they want something. Yep. And so they tend to mold their experience and then justify it later. So if I think you're absolutely right, Mark, you understand what their win is, then that's it.
And to everybody out there, it can be really uncomfortable to ask what that personal thing is. But I can promise you the hardest time it is to ask is the first time you try. After you ask and somebody appreciates it and they tell you what's happening, first of all, you've got some trust with them, that they trust you with some personal revelation. But you realize it isn't that hard. People are usually happy to share it if you ask the right way. And it gets easier, and it is the magic. And you have to learn how to ask. You can't just say, what is the emotion that you're going to buy on? You have to ask the question worded like, what does this mean to you personally? Because that kind of gives somebody with reservations permission to bail out and go to the business outcome. But most of the time, if you've got some sort of a personal trust and you're asking it in private, they'll at least crack the window open to what the personal thing is that they're really thinking about.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
So what have we forgot to talk about that you'd like to make sure that we get out here?
Well, just that one of the differentiators for us, Mark, is we don't just do pen testing or cyber risk mitigation. We do world-class pen testing and cyber risk mitigation. And again, it's about the person and serving the individual and not just a cold entity. We have a very scoping quality control process or delivery process from scoping the engagement, which is the very initial onset. We care about what is their win, what is it they're trying to achieve, under what framework. Is it for HIPAA risk? Is it for payment card, or is it for something else? All the way down through the delivery of the service, the face-to-face, Zoom, COVID kind of legitimized this. So we do a lot of face-to-faces with the technology to delivering and debriefing the client, and then, asking them what's next and offering next steps as well. So we'd like to think that we're differentiated, not so much by technology that other companies have, but by the way we treat our clients and the way we serve them.
Really important. It could really be easy in that cybersecurity world to just settle into bits and bytes and jargon, and reducing that back and bringing it back to people and business and results is, I think that's key. That's going to take you a long way.
Well, we hope so. I learned a lot as a young WordPerfect representative that used to show up and throw up, and we try not to do that. It's exciting. Cybersecurity, there's so much cool stuff. It's a multi-layered pie, like Thanksgiving dinner. You've got endpoint protection and incident response policy and acceptable use policy and pen testing and scanning, and I could just go on, right? There's a lot of fun things in cybersecurity, but the bottom line is, who are we serving? What are their needs? What's their win, and how can we
and which of these tools and which settings on which of the tools solves this client's problem this time?
Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, Greg, thanks for joining us. How can people get a hold of you or Webcheck Security?
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for the invite. I would love it if they would either visit us at webchecksecurity.com, and every page has or should have a form, or they can register for webinars. We've got one coming up on December 14th with regards to assigning a dollar value to cyber risk, which is kind of cool. Or Mark, they can just reach out at get in touch at webchecksecurity.com. It's get in touch at webchecksecurity.com. And I or one of our cyber specialists will quickly return their email and engage in a conversation.
Great. Well, Greg, thanks a lot for investing your time with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. I love what you're doing. I love your approach, and have me on again sometime.
I would love that. And thanks, people, for joining us on the ValuClarity podcast. We will remind you that your value only exists in your customer's head, which means that sales, marketing, business is more like brain surgery than you might have thought. Thanks, and have a high value day.
Yesterday, my office space, dreaming in the fake life, the boss will